In this video, I'll tell you why trying some boring models can make you a better miniatures painter. This channel is very much about how to get into the wargaming hobby. Therefore, a lot of the content here is aimed at beginners, people new to building and painting their miniatures, that kind of thing. That said, I hope there's frequently some nuggets of wisdom in there, for longtime painters as well. I know I've been painting for a long time, but I still love to watch tutorials, even for things I think that I know how to do, because I still pick up bits and pieces of stuff that I didn't know. I hope this video will help new and veteran painters alike. I recently asked the viewers on my Every Other Sunday live show, which is live here on YouTube generally, every other Sunday, but I asked them to give me ideas for video topics that would be beneficial to new wargaming hobbyists, and I got a ton of great responses and ideas. It was really actually quite useful. This video is the first one inspired by that live show, and it's kind of an amalgamation of several suggestions for topics that I received. It's a bummer, but practice is pretty important in learning new skills, pretty much all new skills, especially as a beginner, like trying to learn the new skill. But even as a seasoned painter, practice is how you learn new painting techniques to add to your arsenal of, painting knowledge. Learning about a technique online is great, obviously, and it helps a ton to get the idea of how to do a thing in your head. It's like being taught in a class. But it's available to everybody everywhere, right? But ours is a very tactile hobby. It is the definition of a hands-on hobby, and these new techniques don't always work right the first time after you watch a new video. It takes a little bit of work with your hands. A big problem that people just getting into the hobby have is that they buy fancy models that they love. They love the looks, they love the lore, they love how they work, in the game for their army, whatever. And that part's really easy to do, obviously, if you have the money and can find the model in stock. It's just a simple transaction at that point. However, if they're new, to painting, or maybe even this is the first model they've ever painted, then there's a very, very small chance that how they picture the finished model in their head is how it will actually turn out. This causes new hobbyists to sometimes get discouraged or even quit. Let me put it in a different context. If you wanted to learn to play guitar and you wanted to play like high-end metal solos like Kirk Hammett from Metallica does or whatever, you shouldn't just go out and drop $5,000 on a new guitar and then just sit there and brute force attempt to learn those songs by listening and then just trying to play. Like you listen and then just, you know what I mean? Like that generally won't work for most people. You'll get discouraged and probably stop. And then you'll just have a $5,000 purchase on your credit card, which is not good. It's better to start with a cheap or even borrowed used guitar and start learning the fundamentals. The fundamentals aren't usually all that fun, admittedly. Kind of a misnomer there, right? But they are a necessary thing to learn so that you can play guitar. The other necessary thing? Practice. While there are a very few virtuoso musicians out there who are completely self-taught, they all got that way through constant practice. Jimi Hendrix was almost completely self-taught, just listening to the radio and trying to play what he heard, which he was doing upside down on a guitar that wasn't strung for which kind of hand he played with. But he still did it, and he did it for 8 to 12 hours every day when he first started out, which is why he then became Jimi Hendrix. Practice is very important when you first start out. Practicing painting, however, is very different from practicing music. In music, you can use the same guitar and the same book or app or video or whatever it is you're going to use to practice over and over and over again. You might need more advanced books or classes or whatever after you learn the stuff in your current books or apps or whatever, but mostly once you've got it, you've got it. You've got the stuff there, and you can keep practicing, do it as much as you want. In painting, we can use the same brushes over and over generally, but a lot of the things that we use in this hobby are consumables, usually the paints and the models, and you go through models faster than paints. So when you decide to finally start to paint miniatures, or, if you've been painting for a while now, but want to try a new technique or something along those lines, then practicing your painting on simple, cheap, and maybe even boring models can be key to getting better, so that in the future you can work on the fancy miniatures that you really like the looks of and not feel as if you ruined them by not having enough practice. Models that you don't have so much invested in, both like in dollars and emotional investment, are a lot better to practice and try new things on. So where to get cheap miniatures? Well, if you have a game store near you, like an independent game store, they probably carry Reaper Bones miniatures. They're quite inexpensive in most cases, and you can easily prime them up and start practicing pretty much right away. You never almost ever have to build them, except some of them. A lot of the single figure ones don't have any kind of parts, and you just start painting, right? There is a note here, though. The Reaper Bones minis don't generally like to be spray primed like with a rattle can, right? Like airbrush primer, through an airbrush, that seems to work fine. But a spray can primer, if you do use a spray can primer, they'll be sticky for like forever, as far as I can tell, right? So don't use a rattle can, spray can, whatever on Reaper Bones. Probably start with like a brush-on primer. Just about every paint line has some sort of brush-on primer that they sell. Although I have heard now that the Army Painter spray cans sometimes work on the Reaper stuff. I've not tried them on the Reaper stuff. Let me know in the comments below if you've tried the Army Painter spray cans on it. On the Reaper site, they said sometimes they seem to work. Or if you don't want to mess with priming at all, grab yourself some of the pre-primed WizKids minis, also from your local independent store. They've got D&D miniatures, Pathfinder miniatures, even like Transformers and My Little Pony, like if that's your jam. All of these models are already primed kind of with this gray material, so you can start painting right over them. Or if you want to, you could spray them black or white or whatever color you'd like as like a base, and then start painting over that as well. Kind of like the Reaper Bones models, they are pretty decent sculpts with okay detail. Sometimes they're a little bendy, but not too terrible. Or if you're not just a miniature gamer, but also a board gamer, you probably have board game minis you could use. A lot of board games come with a lot of minis these days. Think like Zombicide, or pretty much anything else from Cool Mini or Not, or board games from Mantic, or pretty much anyone else. Like, they don't usually have the best details, the miniatures that come in these like board game boxes and stuff like that. But when you're practicing, models are models, right? And practice is practice. So if you're not interested in board games, then you probably have a friend who is, and maybe has grabbed a few too many Kickstarters, and who would be glad for you to paint some of their minis as well. What I usually do is I keep some old Space Marines on my desk, like old, like pre-Primaris Space Marines that I bought used in a big lot on eBay years and years and years ago. I primed some of them white and some of them black, and I use them to kind of test new paints and other types of products. It's always useful to have them right there. I also use them sometimes for practicing wet blending, which I'm still not that great at, to be honest, but I am getting a little bit better. I rarely use it in my normal tabletop painting techniques, so the only time I get to try and practice it is on tester models like this. The most important things about practicing painting: 1, it's practice, so you're not as worried about screwing up the models. You're using a boring model on purpose so that you're not concerned about perfection, right? It puts you in the right headspace to learn, right? And B, it builds muscle memory. I've talked about the importance of muscle memory before. Pachow. But just like building that brush-wielding muscle memory can take some time, and sometimes the results aren't immediate, so it is best to practice on cheap and boring minis that you don't care much about. And when you don't care too much about the models, and you're not really concerned about the outcome because learning the process is the point, then you're also more likely to try new things, new techniques that you probably wouldn't try on fancy models that you care more about and plan to take to games at your friend's house, or maybe even the local game store, or maybe even like a big tournament. Like, these practice models, they become just mere tools and not the outcome themselves. Practice is very important, especially when you start painting or when you want to learn a new technique, right? So So practice on your cheaper, more boring models to get comfortable. Then you can start painting on the fancy stuff you want to paint once you get a little bit more comfortable. And all of that painting on the fancier stuff will also count as practice as well. But hold on to those practice models even after you get more comfortable painting miniatures. At some point, you'll want to practice either a new technique or try a new product, and they'll be there to help you out. Always keep learning. I hope this video helps you and will make it easier for you to practice painting without fear of ruining a model that you really love. Instead, practice on boring models to learn. Do you have any models that you like to practice on? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, please hit the like button down below. It really helps the channel out and helps the video get out to more people who will learn how to practice on boring models. Subscribe to see more videos every single week, and thanks for watching.